Hey everyone, welcome to Screw the Stock Market, where we talk about alternative assets outside of the stock market with the goal of attaining financial freedom and taking control of our finances and our lives. Today, our guest is Lane Kawaoka, and he has done all sorts of different things. He's a self-described anti-guru, and he is really focused on helping his clients and his network to grow their wealth. He's a multifamily apartment investor, syndicator, with over 6,000 units. I think on the episode he said over 8,000 now. He's been on Forbes. He's done all sorts of cool stuff. Aziz, what'd you think of the episode today?
It was interesting. It was good. It was a little bit enlightening, and I think maybe for those who are just getting started, it can be a little bit. I don't want to say demoralizing a little bit, but it could be construed as demoralizing just because he kind of
we
really
can call it a reality
harsh.
check.
It is a reality check. I mean, he points out the fact that, you really need to have the money to jump into this game and get to the point where you do become wealthy. But you really do need the startup capital, and you need the kind of the discipline and the ability to gain that capital to begin with. It was good. It was kind of eye opening, and I think some people would kind of view it as like, oh crap, I've got to get my life together in a sense as they listen.
It's good. There's a time for that, and one of the things I think, because we jumped around a little bit, there's parts where he was talking about his own personal story, and then we jump into what his message is for you as a listener right now, what you need to be doing. And then we jump back to his personal story. So there's like parts where I feel like there were some really good takeaways. And I felt like he kind of led to a path. We're saying, if you're not an accredited, wealthy person right now, by that definition, which is kind of what we would call like a lower level wealthy person, like an entry level wealthy person, that should be your first goal, is to get there. And he talks about how investing in single family, fix and flip, turnkey, small scale real estate could be a way to get to that level first. And then once you're there...
He also called it a poor man's game.
He did.
Yeah, it's the poor man's way of getting to build up enough wealth to get into the real game.
Hey, but let's, you're the listener, your own situation. And if that's really where you are, that's where you got to get to, I'll be the first to admit right now, I'm still making offers to flip houses, even though I'm still in this apartment game, because that's where I am. The cash would mean something to me and my lifestyle right now. Even though it's a lot of work and it might be technically a distraction from where we need to be going. But the point is, you as a listener, take that and do with it what you will. But yeah, if you have that path of like, okay, first I got to get accredited. And then once I'm accredited, then I can have access to any private placement, any investment opportunity, like what we do through syndications or funds. Then you can really start to make money, and your wealth will start to grow at an accelerated rate. If there's a one kind of roadmap kind of thing that I would take away from that, it's that from the episode, right? Is there anything else I missed?
No, that's the key part. I mean,
so while it might
start
be a little bit discouraging, you got to start somewhere.
That's true. And with that, we welcome you all to listen to the episode, and hopefully you get something out of it.
Anything else? I think we have some other stuff. Follow us on Instagram at Screw the Stock Market Show. And we have a new ebook that has just been released. So you can download that at screwthestockmarket.com/ebook. That's where we're going to put it. We haven't built the website yet, but by the time you listen to this, the website will be built, and you can go to screwthestockmarket.com/ebook and download the ebook. It's all about mindset, and it's kind of repurposing or reviewing a lot of the lessons that we've captured throughout all of the episodes of the show so far. And we've taken nuggets from it to kind of capture just valuable lessons and nuggets that we've learned ourselves. And so we want that to be a nice, easy read for you guys too. So without further ado, hope you guys enjoy the show, and thanks for tuning in. Hey there, thank you so much for tuning into the show. It means so much to me and Aziz that you are actually listening, that there's people really listening to the show. We're having fun with it, and we hope that you're getting a lot of value too. Education is just one of the first steps that anyone should take when they're on a journey towards financial freedom or personal development. And so it's great, you're doing the right things. I want to suggest a second step that you might want to consider if a lot of the things that we're talking about on the show are resonating with you. Consider visiting our website, legatoinvest.com/invest. And there's a button where you can click to gain access to our opportunities. And what will happen is you'll schedule a call with us. We'll talk, we'll get on a Zoom, and we'll get to know your investment experience. We'll get to know you. We'll learn about your objectives. And then if it's a good fit, we'll actually start to present you with real investment opportunities from time to time. And you'll be in the driver's seat where you can say, no, I don't like that one. And yes, I do like that one. And those real decisions, that means that you're actually in the game towards your financial freedom. So consider visiting legatoinvest.com/invest. Again, that's LEGADO invest.com/invest. Hey everyone, welcome to Screw the Stock Market. We're really excited to have you with us today. Again, this is the show where we talk about alternative investments outside of the stock market, always with the focus on taking control of our finances and our lives and our time. And so today we have a special guest with us, Lane Kawaoka. And he's a real estate investor. He's done some very impressive things. And Lane, we're going to let you share some of that with us. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you came from and how you got started and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, I think like a lot of the listeners here, I call it the linear path. Like I was kind of told to go to school, study hard. I happened to be good at math and science. I don't know where that came from, but I became an engineer, right? Because that's what you do. And I started to work for the man, and I was not a very good engineer. So I went into project management, and I, worked on construction projects right out of college. Worked for the railroad, and first day I hated my job. Right? I mean, I'm like, man, this is hard work. I got to be outside in the elements. I'd rather be inside. By the way, that's just kind of me. But I bought a house to live in. Again, following this dogma of buying a house to live in, paying it down, blindly put your money in the 401k nonsense that just makes Wall Street rich. And, maybe you can retire in your 60s or 70s after you've been a little good boy or girl, right? So, but I bought a house. That house to live in was never home because as most young professionals, you're working on the road a lot of times. And I had the foresight to like, wow, I'm only here on Saturday. Let me just rent this thing out and make some money. And that was kind of my aha moment when I got off this linear path and I realized like, with rental real estate, you're able to make money four ways: mortgage pay down, appreciation, tax benefits. And at the time, the biggest thing for me was the cash flow, which I kind of focus on today as we buy large apartments. I realized like, wow, if I just keep buying these rental properties, I'll be able to replace my W-2 income and eventually quit the day job doing that.
So you say that you just decided that you were going to rent your house out. The whole house? I mean, were you just kind of living in the basement at this point, or I mean, how did you do that? Kind of like the breakdown of that process.
Oh yeah, good question. Because where the heck did I live? So I was on mobile construction crews. So I was able to kind of leech off the company and just live in company lodging even on the weekends. Say I'm gonna get supplies or whatnot for my crew. So I just went totally like rambling man mode. So, I went from like saving 30 grand, 40 grand a year, being pretty frugal at the time, to like almost six figures saving. So all that went to buying, down payments on rental properties. And, today, I think a lot of the listeners, right, like we're not talking about rental, flipping houses or wholesaling houses. To me, that's what you do when you're broke, right? Or you don't have a day job and you want to trade time for money. But myself, and I think a lot of people listening here, you have good paying day jobs, you make over 60 grand a year, you check that box. And your highest and best use is likely at your day job. Trouble is you may or may not like it, like how I did. But just will kind of follow my path here. Just if you save up enough money and you buy assets that produce income for you that are not retail garbage like the 401k stock market stuff. And it's nice that I can say that here because sometimes people think it's kind of offensive, right? They think I'm a jerk or something like that. But as a 20-year-old kid, I learned very early on, like here I am making like 30-40% returns on my money. I'm not really that great of an investor. I have a property manager doing all my dirty work for me. I mean, if people want to go to my website, look at how the numbers work out, and they can go to simplepassivecashflow.com/returns. I do like a little whiteboard exercise, but 20-30% returns in your money pretty conservatively compared to like 8-10% in the stock market, and it goes up and down like a roller coaster. And I'm like, WTF? Who stole all my money? Right. And then we start to realize that it's all like, it's like the Wizard of Oz, right? Pay no attention to the people, the financial planners. Financial planners aren't that bad. Like it's more the people above them, right? That you're not seeing, the myriad of middlemen upon middlemen that makes up the Wall Street institutional complex. And I was like, wow, like this is why my parents had to work so damn hard and long. Where, today we'll work with clients, typically their net worth will be $1.5 million and they're able to save just a mere $50,000 a year. We can get them to financial freedom in like 4 to 6 years easily by kind of employing some of these wealth building strategies that, the alternative investment strategies.
Okay. That's really exciting. That's exactly what we want to hear about. So first of all, yes, throughout the interview, feel free to throw shade at the stock market, at the man, at the establishment, because that's exactly it.
Cool.
But okay, so tell us a little bit about just kind of how you map it out. You can either tell us your own personal journey, or maybe what you would tell to that person who's in the audience right now listening, saying, "Yes, I want to retire in 4 to 6 years. What do I do?"
Yeah, I mean, I'll just share my own personal experience, right? And granted, it took me a lot longer because, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I didn't really, know exactly what to do, and part of this is...
Mistakes are good. That's where you learn.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like very counterintuitive wealth building knowledge that we're all brainwashed to do, right? Like buy a house to live in or pay down your mortgage, which is what I kind of did for a couple of years there. Do a 15-year mortgage to pay less interest, right? That's just not what the wealthy people do. But, so again, 2009, I bought my first rental, and then it took me a couple more years to buy up the next rental property. And this is all in Seattle, Washington. Nice place to live, but not the best place for cash flow. And this is kind of early on, I learned that sophisticated investors invest for cash flow, because if the recession comes tomorrow, you're cool, you cash flow. But if you're in these high appreciation markets, such as Seattle, I mean, pretty much all the West Coast, right? All of California, Hawaii, New York, Boston, Miami, we don't invest in those places. Also because they're typically blue states. We like to invest in red states where we have the landlord laws on our side too. And the red states typically are a little bit more, growth minded too. We invest in Phoenix, Arizona, Houston, Dallas, Texas, and then Alabama these days. Red states, emerging markets is what we call them. But, early on, I didn't really understand this, right, concept, right? Because people have this idea of investing in their backyard. But when you start to understand that you invest where the numbers make sense. So here's a little lesson for people listening. We follow this like 1% rule so that we know we're able to cash flow. And why? Because if a recession comes tomorrow, we're not killed like these house flippers or people gambling on appreciation. Those are the idiots in The Big Short that got killed with the real estate stuff, not the quiet cash flow investors investing in boring assets in these flyover states. So I was buying properties in places like Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis, Pennsylvania. And I followed this, simple 1% rule where you take the monthly rents divided by the purchase price. And you're looking for something that's 1% or higher. So at the time, we're buying properties, 80 grand that we're renting for like $850, $900 a month. So a little bit over the 1% rule. Nowadays, it's a little harder, right? But you're certainly not going to find that in California, right? California, you're going to find places in the ghetto for 600 grand. Like we don't buy places in the ghetto. First off, we buy them little better places. But that $600,000 property in California is going to rent for $3,000. So $3,000 divided by 600 grand, that's 0.5%. That's no bueno. That's not going to work, right? People want to go to my website, pick up my free analyzer, go to simplepassivecashflow.com/analyzer. You guys can break down all the numbers, but 1% rent to value ratio is kind of the first stop, right? So I bought 11 of these rentals by 2015. I thought I was cool. Then I started to realize that accredited investors, higher net worth investors, don't really invest in rental properties. Go figure, right? It's a great, don't get me wrong, folks. If you guys are listening out there and your net worth is under $500,000, great way to get started. That's how I grew my net worth, right? If not, I'd still be dicking around in the stock market, right? Going up and down and paying a lot of taxes because it's all ordinary income.
And just to clarify for the listeners, accredited investors are usually individuals that earn over $200,000 a year. So there's special rules that allows you to seek out those types of investors and give them, opportunities that you normally wouldn't be able to open up to folks that are non-accredited investors that make less than that dollar amount.
Yeah. I mean, there is a SEC definition, but I'm kind of just broadly speaking, right? Like when you're, I don't want to offend anybody here, but when you're under $500,000 net worth, you're kind of a broke guy, right? It's a different operating system, right? It's first off, you got to have a good personal finance skills. You got to keep a freaking budget. You can't spend more than you make. I would say 95% of people in this country need a freaking budget or need to make more than 50 grand a year. It's probably not the people we have listening here. And we'll just say what it is. Like majority of people are in that bucket. And people like Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, like those are the people they should listen to. But what I'm talking about here are people who make a decent salary. You have to go buy rental properties to get your net worth up to a certain point so you can start to play like an accredited investor, investing in syndications and private placements, alternative investments. And then at that point, it becomes a different game where it's more networking with other people to find who to invest with, more importantly, who to stay away from. And that was kind of the genesis that I went through around 2015-ish, right? Like my net worth was probably around $1 million at that point. I had 11 rental properties, but then I started to pay to play to get into different mastermind groups. And here is where I got access to a lot of accredited investors, a lot of doctors, lawyers, engineers, or a lot of them weren't working their crummy day jobs anymore, right? They're moving on the path to a purely passive investor mode, where they chilled and, drank nice wine and, relax because time was more valuable than money. So at this point, I started to learn like what they did, and I realized like, wow, a lot of the stuff is very ass backwards than what I was taught, and especially what you learn in the cubicle world, right? Amongst these coworkers that you have, things like buying a house to live in. Here's my thing. I think it's great for most people out there because they're really bad with their money. If they don't put it to a mortgage, they'll spend it like drunken sailors. So it's a forced piggy bank. But for people listening here who are good with their money, they save, you may put it into the crummy stock market. But I would say don't buy a house until your net worth is 2 or 3 times X the price of the property. So if you're buying a $500,000 house, don't buy it until your net worth is at least 1.5 mil or at least $1 million.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I mean, who am I
It's funny.
say, right?
I had a call with someone recently like that. Someone who's going to be essentially, she's like, hey, I'm ready to buy a house. I don't know if I should live in it or I don't know if it should be an investment. At the end of the call, she came out of it. And I'm a realtor, right? So I'm happy to help either way. And at the end of the call, she came out of feeling really pumped. She's like, no, I'm going to be an investor. I'm going to grow my net worth. And I think she intuitively came to the conclusion that you did. It's like, there's more to gain essentially from having assets.
But yeah, I mean, it depends on where you fall in the paradigms, right? Like if you're like most people who suck with their money, buy that house to live in because that's probably all she wrote for you, right? It's like not, I look around here, like not all of us are NBA players, like let's go figure, right?
But it's possible. It's possible. It's possible to kind of gear up. I mean, we all started in that same kind of position at one point. And we made that mental shift to try to adjust and shift out of it into something, bigger and better. So it's possible to change out of that. So just
Yeah, yeah,
because you start off as a, single-minded, I'm just going to buy a house with a mortgage kind of mindset, it doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck in that frame.
yeah. No, you're exactly right. And unlike getting into the MBA where you need physical attributes to get there, um, finances is, a lot of it is just time. And some people call it hard work and grit. I just call it time and staying focused on the right things. Not buying a house right away. But like most of my clients, we have a lot of guys who are like young computer programmers making multiple six figures right after college. We call them Henrys, stands for high income, not wealthy yet. But it's a rather minority part of our investor group. The majority of them are like 40 to 50-year-olds, dudes who are older dudes with, kids that are a little older than 5 to 10 years old, but they have $1.5 million in their qualified retirement plans. And they just did it the wrong way this whole damn time, right? The stock market, et cetera, right? Blindly putting, it's a company match. I'm like, well, that's nonsense, right? At least that's what we say in the accredited investor world, right? We kind of poo-poo all the stupid stock market stuff, and that's kind of why it's a fun group here, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think another aspect too is that a lot of times when you talk about like being a high net worth individual, like having at least a mil or $1.5 million net worth, some people will say, well, I have that in my retirement account. I don't have that in just, in the bank that I can just pull out and invest. Not realizing, there are strategies and ways that you can tap into that retirement, savings and net worth that you've built up over time to help you toward building up these other assets and, private equity investments like, real estate or buying a business or anything else that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And I think you kind of mentioned it there, like if you got $1.5 million, $2 million, even if it's in your retirement account, that's not jack. Like you really need to get to 4 or 5 million net worth. That's what I define as more end game net worth level. The reason being is, if you can find an investment that makes you 8 to 10%, or you go into the crap stock market again, then you can kind of live your life, off of a cash flow stream of 20 grand a month at that point. But, I'm not gonna, poo-poo anybody from working really hard and saving their way to $1.5 million. Because that's typical, right? Like that's the saver's mentality. Yeah. That's that book I think a lot of us read early on, like The Miller Next Door, right? But dude, that's not jack. $1 million, $2 million is nothing these days. And you're not going to get there by saving your way there or driving a freaking Camry. Or maybe you are, but that's your thing. But like the whole point is to find a way to grow your money. And you're going to do this with the people around you. And you have to find other high net worth accredited investors. And I'm not saying like, when you get above $20 million, $30 million net worth, now you're getting into more of the business owner type. Like you can't get above 8 figures unless you're not a business owner, right? So if a lot of people are listening are just W-2 employees, even if you're a doctor making $500,000 a year, it's going to be, unless you're a really good passive investor and you're not paying that much taxes and you're doing infinite banking, which is kind of the trio combo that we teach, you're not going to ascend to those higher multiple 8-figure, 10, 20, 30 million plus. Now, when you get to 50, $100 million plus, all the way up to maybe $500 million, we call that the family office level, right? And that's probably not in the cards for most people listening, right? Because most people have advisors to get them to that level. They're already in there, right? They're already business owners who were $30 million net worth, and they got them to 100 plus. But this is like the shadow world. I'm just kind of outlaying around and kind of putting people in their place. And this is what I've kind of been humbled myself too. As you start to ascend, you start to realize that this is all a kind of a wealth building game. And what gets you to $1 million net worth is not what's going to get you to 5, and what's going to get you to 10.
No, that's a really valuable peek into that world. I think for a lot of us, as you imagine someone who's wealthy and you just think, oh, they're wealthy, right? But there's different levels, exactly as you pointed out. And I think You know, for us and for our audience, I think one of the really important things is to just remember like what we really want out of life. And even if we don't get to that $100 million level, if you want it, you can get it. But if that might not be what you want, maybe you just want enough that you can like take days off and be a good, soccer coach to your kids or something. I think a lot of these things are going to be able to get you there, probably with a little bit of a lower bar. Um, so,
Yeah, I mean, my
Ling,
goal is to get people from 1 to 10 million net worth. Anything more, and you're still interested in the whole growing your net worth. I mean, that's what the groups like Tiger 21 are for. But
Mhm.
1 to 10 million is, I think, like you're saying, like, dude doesn't need more than 5 million net worth, right? Like,
That's enough to really drastically change people's lives.
Yeah,
And I think make people really happy, right? Like you can have a beautiful life with that.
Yeah, but I think at the time, like, and I have like investor onboarding calls all the time, and I talk. Everybody's kind of the same, and we post a lot of these coaching calls free on the website and the YouTube channel, and you start to see like there's no special snowflake out there, guys. We all know who you are. You're the financial tinker within your group. You've got $1.5 million, and you think you're hot stuff because all your friends are broke, right? They may make high salaries, but they're broke, right? Because you're just not good with their money. But I'm just telling you, in the grand scheme of the world, when you step up, now you're looking at guys between $1 to $5 million net worth. And, this is the people that you need to start hanging out with more.
So tell me, okay, so on your own personal journey, was most of that journey done through single family investing, or was it through multifamily investing? It was a little bit unclear to me.
Yeah, and that was kind of where I kind of at 2015 I kind of hit a pivot point. I was using property managers, right? Because I had a full-time day job and I valued my sanity and my time. But with 11 rental properties at a few $100s of cash flow each, that's $3,000 of passive income a month. Right. I'm not going to complain. Great to have that money, but that's nowhere near what an American family needs. You're going to probably need 3x that. So do the math, right? I need like 30 something properties. Now, just to give people a sense of what it's like to own 11 properties, I maybe had an eviction every once or twice a year, some kind of big catastrophe that happened once a quarter with that. No problem. Like the property manager manages it all. What if I need 33 properties, multiply that by 3? So now I'm having an eviction or two every other month, it seems like, and catastrophes every week or so, maybe every other week if I'm lucky, right? And this is where I started to search, and I just happened to find the world of, higher net worth investors. And, a lot of these guys were investing as passive investors, LP, in larger syndication deals. And this really opens up all types of asset classes. I kind of found a home within multifamily apartments, workforce housing, Class B type housing. But you can do mobile home parks, self-storage. And I think a lot of it at this point, a lot of investors, and part of me, what a pure passive investor is, you start to build portfolio, not only of the assets you particularly like. You might like self-storage more than industrial, whatever. But it's more about the people that you work with, right? The operators, the people who you're entrusting with your money. Because unlike going to Wall Street, where you've got these institutions taking a heck of a lot of fees, it's your job as the investor to do your own due diligence and vetting the people. And people hear about it all the time. It may not make sense, but real estate is a people game. And this is where we encourage people. We have an ecosystem of passive investors where people build relationships with each other. We have fun events. We do retreats so people can build lifelong friendships. And part of that is, they figure out where to invest and they copy what their friends do.
It's interesting that you say that real estate is a people's game. And, the more and more that we've delved into it, Alex and I myself, we found that is so true on so many levels. I mean, the whole key to gearing up your portfolio, your assets, your everything in terms of your wealth gaining, it's all about building connections with other people who will help you on that journey and push you into the next level. It's 99% of the process. I feel like it. So it's a really critical and clutch point that most people just don't understand and they don't grab. They think that they're missing some secrets, sauce or something that they have to read a billion books to find out about. And you should become knowledgeable about how the processes works and the financials and this, that, and the other. But it's really your network and the people that you interact with that are really going to take you into that next level.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I will say that the dummy warning label here is if you're broke guy, work your ass off, save your money, make a budget first, right? Like we're talking, like I think like once your net worth hits a certain point, then the networking really becomes really important. And I think I'll overlay another concept here, because in a lot of my investor group, there's a lot of first generation wealth people. Because I was first generation, right? I'm the first person in my family to, ascend to 7 figures. Part of that, and some people call this the immigrant mindset. I just call it first generation mindset, like where you're taught to work hard, do everything yourself, trust nobody, and that's cool. It gets you off the ground, whether you want to define that as $500,000 net worth or $1 million net worth. It's a doggy dog world because it's kind of an S show, right? At that point. But once your net worth passes a certain point, you need to play nicer with others. And, as our investor group grew larger, I've started to have, infrequent calls with more second generation, third generation wealth people. A lot of these guys' net worth are 5, 10 million plus. And a lot of the attitudes I get is, they don't know about the processes. They could care less, but they've been groomed and they have the peer network around them. And they just say, dude, I kind of get this stuff. It's simple enough, right? I mean, rental real estate is not that difficult to begin with. But they say, well, I trust what my buddy says. He's been investing with you for a while, and they go off of more networks. And as somebody who was groomed in the first generation, trust nobody, work your ass off, learn everything, do everything yourself. It's been a kind of a clash of my ideas that got me here. But I've been kind of slowly getting around, and as seeing more and more of this evidence happen, I'm definitely seeing like, and just kind of pointing out there was a paradigm shift in terms of strategy here.
Very interesting. So, I mean, that's interesting, and I've heard that from a lot of other people who raise capital. Right? It's very frequent that the people who come and give them $1 million check to invest in an apartment building won't ask to look at spreadsheets, won't ask to. And I think it's probably because of what you're talking about, right? They've already conveyed and the trust is already there and the relationship is already in place. The track record might already be in place. But probably more importantly, that referral might already be in place.
Yeah.
But tell me, like, for the people who are kind of making that transition and maybe they're not ready to write a big check with a sponsor on a deal, what are the things that they should be looking at before writing that check? In your opinion, how do you recommend that someone look into?
Here's the hard part, right? Like, and I think this is why the Wall Street companies make so much money, is because people are pretty lazy these days. They are really bad at making relationships and getting off the beaten path, or let alone getting their ass off their computer and talking to somebody. And that's what this, type of alternative investing requires. You're getting off the beaten path. There are landmines out there, but if you huddle and find a community, you can probably successfully navigate those landmines, especially if you're just copying what other people are doing, who have already had success with certain people. But, some of those things that are kind of coming off the top of my head, a lot of this, there's a lot of stuff, right? Obviously. And we do teach a lot of this. We have an e-course for this. But, like assets under ownership, like today we've got like $1.2 billion of assets under ownership. Not many people, $200 million, $500 million of assets may seem impressive, but it's not very much. I mean, we were there at one time. But the institutional players, the guys with 5 billion plus, you're not going to get the returns you get from somebody like us, right? Because there's just more overhead. They're more established. So, especially for people between $1 to $5 million net worth, you can't go with the institutional guys, right? It's just like in the turnkey rental world. there's a few outfits that everybody will go to because they hear about them a lot. But I know, or anybody who's been there, done that, knows that those companies just gouge the investors. And a lot of times there's like a $20,000 markup on the houses or worse. That's the stock market, right? For you. That's Wall Street for you. They've earned it. They've earned the branding and the badge. But as a passive investor who is under $1 to $5 million net worth, you have to find better returns and you have to get off the beaten path. So it's a lot of it's distinguishing between, well, who is a good middle market operator, kind of like us? We've 8,500 units, $1.2 billion, over 60 deals, and who's a fake it till you make it? Because a lot of this is an internet marketing game. Everybody's got a podcast. Everybody's got a book, right? Everybody's got like a YouTube channel these days. And this is where like I've made mistakes myself. Like as a passive investor, I've invested in maybe 3 or 4 people that lost money on because I don't think they probably stole my money. They were just a fake it till they make it. They didn't say what they were going to do. And I would say like the best way to figure this out is to build a relationship with other passive investors, which is a lot longer journey to do and a lot harder work. But that's where you're really going to figure out what the real deal is, right? Because anybody can fudge a PDF of some fake, track record.
And I want to also kind of go back to like the timeline for making something like this happen. How long did it take you to get to the point that you are now? Just to kind of give people a view of how doable and how possible it is.
Well, people aren't going to follow my timeline, right? Because I operate apartments, right? So if they're a passive investor listening, don't listen to what I do, right? Because it's not the same. I'm like 7 feet in basketball, no offense, right? And you don't listen to what I'm saying. Don't listen to my post moves talk, right? But as a passive investor, at least for my, the folks that I consult, it's partially a game of like deploying money with the right people and just being consistent. And, if you can double your money every 5 years with your investments, you do the math, right? You figure out when you get to that terminal point, $4 to $5 million. And it really is like, I use the analogy of like escape velocity. Once you get yourself to a certain point, even 2.5 million, you're kind of getting there already. You can kind of, at that point, this is where we consult with people. We're like, all right, well, maybe your spouse can quit her job, right? And if we can also wrangle in their real estate professional status strategy, so you can use the passive losses to offset some of the ordinary income, awesome. To me, like, we've been talking a lot about deals, right? But to me, deals is like one of the 3 big pieces to this puzzle. Deals first, because you don't want to get your money stolen working with the wrong people. So you got to find other purely passive accredited investors to get around. But, especially if you're investing in real estate, you're not going to double your money in 2 to 3 years, right? It's real estate. And that's why it's good to be in real estate, because although you're not going to get these crazy returns, it's steady and stable. But it allows you to have these passive activity losses to play different levers and games on your taxes. So, take a doctor making $700,000. If we can lower their AGI down to 400,000, a delta of 300, we just saved them 50 cents on every dollar, 150 grand right there. That was like 3 deals that he loaded in 50 grand that instant, 1 year after he got his tax return, he saved, right? So for a lot of the high income earners, the taxes is the most important thing. But unless you start to invest in deals, you can't do the prerequisite. It's the prerequisite to it. Again, this is all stuff that blows all like regular people's stuff out of the water, right? Most people play checkers where we're playing chess with this stuff. And then when you sprinkle in a little infinite banking, whole life insurance overfunded with a 90-10 split there, this is the trifecta, right? This is where you take somebody who's $1.5 million net worth, they save 50, 100 grand a year, and they're done working in half a decade.
Can you tell me the trifecta again? So you got infinite banking, whole life insurance, the deals, and was the third one the tax strategies?
Yeah, taxes.
Okay.
The focus is on the first 2, and I say that because we have a lot of engineers, and they always like geek out on the infinite banking. Infinite banking is cool, but if your net worth isn't $1 million, don't waste your time with it, because a lot of the money goes to fees.
Mm-hmm.
You guys got to grow your money and pay less taxes. Focus on that on later once you get the other stuff going.
Could you
Okay.
give a brief synopsis of what the infinite banking strategy is?
Yeah, it's basically using a nice little tax loophole where you don't have to pay taxes on your life insurance gains. It's a place to hide your money from creditors and litigators. And the way I explain it, think of it like a HELOC, right? You might pay down your mortgage, even though we don't do that here. We don't do that type of stuff. But you in a way you're paying money into your life insurance policy, and that cash value just builds up. Just like if you pay down your mortgage, your equity goes up, so that it's kind of like a pocket of money to go to get at. So it's a great liquidity source. Like a lot of our clients will, you're looking for private placements and syndications. They're not super abundant. It's irregular how they come in and out. Like right now, it's kind of a slow time because interest rates are high. But once things kind of loosen up in terms of lending, maybe in the next year to 18 months, it's going to be gangbusters. And you're going to wish you had this storage of dry powder to be able to go after 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 deals, right? That's where you leave your money to make, 5% tax free in the interim.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the
And
taxes, are you advising these engineers and doctors to go and get real estate licenses to get
Well,
the
okay,
real
so
estate
I'm not a I'm
profession?
not a tax attorney CPA, right? I got to put that disclaimer in there, of course, right? But a
Sure.
lot of this is very simple.
Yeah.
Real estate professional status has nothing to do with being a realtor or getting a license or anything like that. What it has to do with you have active participation in your real estate portfolio. So this is very like user specific. Some people have rental properties. A lot of investors these days that are accredited have never done a rental property. So are like, yeah, screw that. Don't do that. Why go buy a pain in the ass rental property? Just to, depending how much money they're going to be saving, right? So we start to
Mhm.
go down the rubric and steps. If the individual has an adjusted gross income of 450, 500 more, it may make sense to go to this real estate professional brain damage. But I'm talking to the person out there who only makes $200,000, $300,000 or less, married, follow jointly. Don't worry about it, dude. Go make more money. Come back when your income is higher than 400, 500,000. And that may not be you. And it doesn't need to be you, right? We have a lot of people merely making $200,000 as a couple. At the end of the day, it's all what you save. And I think if the takeaway from this Zoom call is it's all what you save. And of course, you have to put it in the right place, right? Which for me, real estate or whatever assets you want to be investing in, businesses, whatever. But it's all like what you net out of your income. So like most of my clients, they're the incomes range vastly, right? We have some guys making only 100 grand. Most make 2 or 300,000 as a household, but we have guys making $1 million plus a year. But the biggest thing I always I'm like, yeah. What's the net, right? What is your income minus all your play money, vacations, expenses? What I want to see is at least, $50,000 to $100,000. And if you're at that level, $100,000, that means you can go into maybe 1 or 2 deals a year. That's enough. That's enough. And a lot of times, especially with our crowd, they're heavy savers. They save too damn much. Right. They're guys who run 45 miles in a 27-mile long marathon. And we had to rein them back. And they said, enjoy your life. Don't work as hard. Right.
Beautiful.
now I will say that we've been kind of, I feel like we've been demoralizing the folks that don't quite meet that income threshold during this call. What can you say that can kind of help them kind of get to that point, to give them a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, so talking to the guys make 150,000 a year,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just going to take you a little longer. You don't have a big enough gun than some of these other guys, so you're gonna have to shoot more bullets, take more time. If you can save 20 grand, 25 grand a year, well, if the other guy's saving 50 grand a year, you do the math. It's going to be, 2 times as long. You're going to have to get more scrappy. You may have to use like infinite banking policy, for example. There's all these kind of add-on strategies that to me, I think are a waste of time. Personally, don't want to sound like an a-hole, but to me it is, right? One thing that people will do is you'll get a loan. You'll take a loan from your own infinite banking policy at 5%. But some people, what they do is they take their infinite banking and they go collateralize it and go to a third party bank and get a rate at 4% or whatever, 3.7 or 5. Now they're all pissed off because the rates are adjusting just as much as what it was. And I tell them, yeah, I told you it was a waste of time, suckers. It's all in fun, right? But like that's the stuff you're gonna have to do, man. If you don't make enough money, your time is less valuable, and you're gonna have to be scrappy. Not saying go out and get a realtor's license and get a second job. You may want to do that. I don't know, right? Like, it's all time, right? And we all value time differently. But certainly, we're talking to people here, make over 60 grand a year, not in huge debt. If you're under that, I'm not a huge fan of college, but college helps people get better salaries apparently, or, don't spend as much money. You got to be able to save $10,000, $20,000 or greater. If not, you're never going to get anywhere.
But the ideal range, though, is you advise that they at least get to a point where they can save at least about $50,000 a year that they can put towards deals.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like being able to bench 135.
No, and
Sorry,
I love the way that
for some people. Maybe that's
I
don't know.
No, man, it's the reality, and that's one of the things I've learned too. Right, is like sometimes some of these concepts might kind of it's a little bit hard to confront. It's like, hey, I'm not really where I want to be, but that's where it starts. It's just kind of having someone to tell you, look you right in the camera, look you right in the face, and say, hey, you're not there yet, but you can get there. You got to put in the discipline. You got to put in the work. You got to find ways to get there. And no one else is going to do it for you. And
my big mission is kind of helping out people who've put in the work, right? To me, financial independence is not for everybody. I mean, society would crumble. That'd be the case, right? But like there are people out there that are good savers. They work their ass off. They're also the people who pay the most taxes. And to me, these are people who deserve it the most, right? It's not the really wealthy people, the trust fund kids. It's not the broke people, living off government subsidized. It's kind of that shrinking middle class. These are the guys powering society forward, paying the most taxes. And these are the people that I think should capitalize on these kind of alternative wealth building strategies.
I love it.
I mean, that's what I was. I was an engineer, didn't like my job. I was kind of forced to do it, the golden handcuffs thing. And like, that's just kind of my peeps.
Lane, I love it. There's one other concept that you shared about when you wrote to me that I really wanted to ask you about, which was the emergency fund 2.0. Because again, you mentioned Dave Ramsey and stuff like that. That was the first time I ever heard of it. And I was like, wow, I got to save for like a year's worth of my expenses. Okay, let me get to it. I'm really curious to hear what your take on that is.
Emergency funds, like Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, those guys cater towards, lower net worth people. And a lot of that is, Dave Ramsey knows the guy is just going to do something stupid at some point and buy some kind of like jet skis or whatnot. They probably shouldn't buy. But here, I take a little bit more pragmatic approach. What's the worst that can happen, right? That's the question I always ask. And for most people listening here that are W-2 workers, you lose your job, or maybe both. You're a married couple, both of you lose your job. I ask you, well, what's the probability that you maybe can't find a job in 3 months? Now, if we're in a recession, depression, obviously that changes, right? But for most people here, it's super easy to find a job, guys. Right? You're just not trying, But for average person, I might say, what's your 3-month burn rate, right? And then double it, right? Just because, I don't know, you get depressed for a month and you just do nothing and you get down on yourself and you don't hit up like the job board. But like for a lot of people, you're not going to spend as much during that time. Just like our apartments, right? Like, just like a business, like our apartments, we may run at $5,000 of expenses per year per unit, right? But if there's tough times ahead, we're going to cut costs, right? We're going to cut some staff and we may be able to run the assets at $3,000 instead of $5,000 per unit per year. Just like people's personal finances, right? Some people in my groups, their burn rate every month is $15,000 to $20,000 a month. Now, if daddy lost his job, they're going to cut back on stuff, obviously, right? So they may be able to run by at $8,000, $10,000 a month. So take that number and, multiply by 3 and then double by engineering factor of 2. And then there's your cash savings that you need right there. But I would say put it into like life insurance, infinite banking, right? And we have the e-course if people want to get it for free on our website, simplepassivecashflow.com/banking. But that's, you don't really need that much in your checking account. I mean, I see everything, guys, right? Like people have like $100,000 in their checking account. I'm like, dude, what's that for? It's like, just keep 20 grand in there, because even if you have a big credit card, it'll pay it, right? And then keep the other 30 grand in your infinite banking as dry powder, and then invest the other 50 for goodness sake, right? So it's this kind of idea of like, let's break it down. Let's just not like blindly follow the general financial advice for the masses. But if people are like business owners, right? Like, so we do have the minority of people in our group are business owners, myself included, right? I might use the infinite banking a little bit differently. Like, for me, what's the worst can happen is not just I lose my day job. It's what if I have all my 60 apartments not do as well, and we have to kind of feed the beast, right? Or somebody who has regular business. Well, I gotta hit my payroll, right, for 3-6 months. Figure out what that number is, and maybe would be prudent to stick a portion of that in your infinite banking, right? But this is where those numbers are way, way bigger than the average W-2 guy, and the average W-2 guy more than they're typically like 3x, 5x more than they really need. If they actually got on the side of the business owner, they'd feel a little bit more comfortable in their shoes with a smaller emergency savings. But the more that you have not doing anything, the more money you have in your emergency savings not doing anything, the slower it is going to be to financial independence. At the end of the day, every dollar you have needs to be working for you, and that's the problem we see with most people's portfolios. They do the call with me, and we look at your rental real estate or your real estate. That's the biggest culprit right there. A lot of debt equity not doing jack for them. And they don't realize like this concept of return on equity as opposed to paying down their mortgage and those types of things that most people are teaching these days. Another place, it would be like the retirement accounts, right? That could be lazy equity there too.
Very interesting. Well, Lane, again, you mentioned your website. Was it simplepassivecashflow.com/banking? Was that right?
Yeah, that was for the banking page. But if people want to get a hold of me, they can check out the podcast, Passive Real Estate Investing, via simplepassivecashflow.com. Our inbox is team@simplepassivecashflow.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. I really have enjoyed it. I love your energy hating on the stock market. And I love your willingness to tell it like it is, man.
I like your guys' energy too.
Well, awesome, man. We really hope to keep in touch. And it's really been an honor having you on the show.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.